Good evening, Tom. Distinguished guests, fellow mining colleagues, entrepreneurs and friends. Namaste. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this important Global Resources Forum. It is wonderful to be here in energetic and thriving India. And congratulations to Team India on your recent Test match win, by the way, against Australia. It was here in India that diamond and zinc mining first began, and it is here in India that some of the world's first iron and steel was produced. India is, I'm also advised, currently the globe's largest producer of sheet mica and third largest producer of iron ore, minerals that are important the world over. This evening, I would like to talk to you about two main things: the success of India under Prime Minister Modi, and an Australian perspective regarding investment and mining, including projects I'm involved in, such as the mega Roy Hill project. Prime Minister Modi is moving mountains in your country. Very few other leaders are as focused on reducing government red tape and encouraging technology to spur economic growth and jobs as Prime Minister Modi is. There is one thing in particular that your Prime Minister said that really caught the world's attention. Quote, "No red tape, only red carpet is my policy towards investors." I borrowed part of the phrase for the title of my second book, From Red Tape to Red Carpet, which was co-launched in India by Prime Minister Modi in 2015 and is available to you all today. Prime Minister Modi's leadership and red tape reduction has transformed India. India is now the fastest growing major economy in the world, lifting living standards and bringing many out of the misery of poverty. A very significant accomplishment, and one that many countries respect. In addition, the Indian inflation rate has dropped, and according to business newspaper Live Mint, foreign direct investment has been growing at an annual average rate of over 28% over the last 3 years, resulting in India hitting a high of over 46 billion of foreign direct investment in 2016. Leading global bank Deutsche Bank estimates that foreign direct investment in India this year will exceed that of 2016. Just last month, as you would all know, Prime Minister Modi's vision was given further enthusiastic support with his party's landslide win at your most populous state, Uttar Pradesh, home to 1 in 6 Indians. This shows that many of your fellow citizens understand the Modi vision for an India where government tape has and is being significantly reduced. Living standards are rising, investment is increasing, and India is clearly open for job-creating investment and business. What an exciting country for entrepreneurs. Now, in Australia, I am often suggesting that our government in Canberra think and act as India's doing under Prime Minister Modi's leadership. You may wonder about my topic tonight. The Emperor fiddles while Rome burns. This was a famous saying that referred to the then last Roman emperor, while that then great Roman civilization was in decline. A saying so important it has lasted over centuries. Of course, as I've already shown, this has no relevance to your country under the outstanding leadership of Prime Minister Modi, but sadly it does for my own country, Australia, as a result of the policies of successive Australian federal governments. I truly wish it were otherwise. Let me quote from a recent broadcast in Australia by one of our most intelligent, respected and brave Australian commentators on his program, The Bolt Report, on Sky News. Andrew Bolt, quote, "Folks, our politicians are fiddling. Right now, our senators in Canberra are arguing about a tax cut for business, arguing about something that could help businesses to keep going, to invest, to hire more Australians when so many of us are now out of work. This is a moment of truth. But our politicians are failing you. The Senate right now is debating whether to limit the government's promise to tax cuts to just small businesses, turnover 10 million a year, no more. And that means excluding the medium and big businesses that hire millions of us, the ones whose investment we both most need. Oh, and that tax cut, it won't be 5% anymore, pure fiddling while the country burns." Now, I know that somehow class war is back in fashion, the politics of envy feeding that fantasy that if we just tax those companies more, then everything would be sweet. Businesses will just keep paying up, not closing down, and we'll be rolling in money. All we need is to grab that cash that those bloodsuckers are sitting on, as the new far-left ACTU secretary, that's a union secretary, seemed yesterday to suggest. And Labor, the paid-up political arm of the union movement, repeats this class war rhetoric. It's trying to block the company tax cuts, although it knows so well it even used to publicly admit it. Those cuts mean more investment, more jobs. Now, some of our top business leaders have been trying to warn us. This country is now at real, this is meaning Australia, of course, at real risk of serious economic trouble if we don't cut red tape, cut spending, and cut company taxes. And I really mean cut them, and get more companies to invest and to create more businesses. BHP Billiton's CEO, I'm sure you're all aware of that company, Andrew Mackenzie, quote, "Without the change that the government is proposing, it will remain uncompetitive and the economy will suffer. Not just for a few years, but actually for decades to come." Quoting myself from my recent speech to entrepreneurs, those gathered today should know what continuing reduction in investment into Australia does. It certainly doesn't provide more sustainable jobs, raise the revenue, or raise living standards. Andrew Bolt, quote, "In fact, things are now so bad that Andrew Liveris, the Australian-born head of the huge Dow Chemical Company, this week warned that because governments have made electricity prices so incredibly high, banned even gas exploration in parts of the country, made business here so tough that there was now no reason to reinvest here and every reason to leave. BHP Billiton's chief financial officer's much the same. Australia now risks missing out on $25 billion of investment over the next decade. The big guys will just invest somewhere else." Now, you may think, like the unions, like Labor, that these business leaders are just greedy, fat cats, looking after their own, except already you are seeing what they've been warning of. Unemployment has gone up to 5.9%. Investment is weak. The government's net debt has already jumped past $300 billion. Yet what do we hear at this very minute from the Senate of Australia? The sound of politicians fiddling. Very sadly, Andrew Bolt is right. Australia needs reminding of the saying that has lasted centuries, quote, "The emperor fiddles while Rome burns," and the decline of the once great Roman Empire. I keep reminding our governments that Australia needs to learn from the Indian leadership and now President Trump's economic leadership also, by taking decisive steps to make doing business in high-cost Australia easier, and like India, roll out the red carpet for investors. Recently, I gave several major speeches in Australia, including one to the Sino-Australian Australasian Entrepreneurs Summit. Urging our government to act as Prime Minister Modi has, slashing red tape. Those recent speeches are available via our website and link showing on the screen. Indeed, I've been saying similarly for years. When I spoke at the 2011 Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, CHOGM, in Perth, where many of our Indian friends were present, I recounted the example of our Tad's Corner thermal coal project and the extraordinary number of regulations it had to achieve, saying, quote, "It is not widely told, for instance, that the cost, risk, and time lost on approvals, permits, and licenses before revenue can be earned has very greatly increased in Australia, making it almost impossible for small companies to carry and comply with such burdens." Has anyone mentioned in this forum, for instance, that to open a new mine, build a rail, and largely a new port, it takes 3,104 permits and approvals? It could be more. That's what we have identified to date, end quote. In fact, to develop the Tad's Corner project, the first mining pit to ship coal from the Galilee Basin in Queensland, we later found it would take more than 5,000 approvals, permits, and licenses. I also went on to say in my CHOGM speech that, quote, "Complacency and unsuitable government policy not in touch with the critical fact that Australia needs to be cost competitive in a changing world has the capacity to undo much of the hard work and natural advantages that Australia and West Australia enjoy." The biggest cause for optimism is that the most severe threats to Australia and West Australia's capacity to act as a business hub over the next century are self-imposed and therefore should be under our control, should we so choose to rectify. If we choose to face up to the reality that Australia needs to be cost competitive in this world and not be mesmerised by our current good fortune with strong commodity prices, a good fortune that will not last, and avoid imposing anti-business taxation measures and policies which destroy Australia's international competitiveness, and continue to invest in appropriate infrastructure, then Australia and West Australia may serve as a business hub long into the future, end quote. Sadly, Australia was mesmerised by the then strong commodity prices, and too little or less was done to enable Australia's international cost competitiveness. While investment in India grows with good government, while you're looking at doing more in your mining sector, it is unsurprising that investment in Australia is now down to record lows, not seen since the 1970s when Australia had one of the most anti-business governments, the socialist Whitlam government. Indeed, the Business Council of Australia in November last year concluded that more than 300 billion of projects are put at risk if Australia does not reform its approval processes. We need mountains moved in Australia and swamps drained. My friend Jim Veets created this song. Hope you enjoy its first playing in India.
Now my story starts in a simple way. I was out for a walk in the bush one day when I picked up an old red rock in the riverbed. It was heavy and covered with mud and dust. It felt like iron and it looked like rust, so I took it home just to see what the experts said. It seems I stumbled on a treasure all right, a high-grade deposit of hematite, and I decided I would try to open an iron ore mine. The government said you can go to work, but there's just a few papers that we'll need first, and they sent me home with an application to sign. I got mining permit blues from my head down to my shoes, filling out forms with a name on the bottom line. I'm beginning to feel real low. I got 100 more pages to go, and another day gone before I can open up mine. You have to get a permit if you want to begin, so I signed the application and I turned it in, and I thought I was finished, but that's just the start of my tale. I was ready to work, I was ready to dig, it all seemed easy and my dreams were big when the postman came with a box in the Monday mail. I opened it up and looked inside, and there I found, to my surprise, lots of new forms for approval before I could start. Seems that in order to fulfill my dream, I'd have to hire a professional team to submit applications in multiple counterparts. I got mining permit blues from my head down to my shoes, filling out forms with a name on the bottom line. I'm beginning to feel real low. I got 100 more pages to go, and another day gone before I can open up mine. For every possibility in every situation, they conveniently provided another application with a paragraph describing the pertinent law to uphold. Each one had a page of legal explanation to encourage my compliance with all the regulations, and a note at the bottom saying, please don't copy or fold. There were forms for building and drilling and clearing, and forms and warnings about non-interfering with the fauna and the flora and the natural vegetation. All the applications have to be reviewed, and after 6 months they all have to be renewed, and my paperwork was growing in perpetual acceleration. I got mining permit blues from my head down to my shoes, filling out forms with a name on the bottom line. I'm beginning to feel real low. I got 100 more pages to go, and another day gone before I can open up mine. There are penalties for even the smallest transgression and fines for environmental degradation to ensure the survival of every snake and slug. I read those forms with increasing apprehension, considering my conviction in criminal detention if I accidentally step on and squash a protected bug. Now, I've done the best I can do out here to protect the land and the atmosphere by building the world's finest iron ore mine. But just when I think I'm getting ahead, a new permit's needed, and I find instead there'll always be another application to sign. I got mining permit blues from my head down to my shoes, filling out forms with a name on the bottom line. I'm beginning to feel real low. I got 100 more pages to go, and another day gone before I can open up mine. I got mining permit blues from my head down to my shoes, filling out forms with a name on the bottom line. I'm beginning to feel real low. I got 100 more pages to go, and another day gone before I can open up mine.
Well, we have to do something in Australia, so we may as well sing. But here's another thing that's been done recently, not by me. And we had floods over in Queensland, and there's this joke that to try and repair the damage of the bridges and things, we now have to put the red tape out. And the joke is, it's stronger than what was there before. Okay. I think I better talk a bit more about the mining industry now, but so let's start on this. Prior to this excessive tape problem, Australia had mining enterprises, the envy of many countries. Investment was poured in to build roads, heavy haul railways, towns and other infrastructure to enable mining, and huge ports to enable exports. In northwest Australia alone, we have 4 major ports and thousands of miles of connecting railways. which will last Australia over many decades. Relatively small expenditure will be required to add more mines in years to come. To maintain Australia's exports, and practical technology will also be critical to help costs. At our mega project at Roy Hill in the north of West Australia, we are investing in technology, as are other producers, to make Roy Hill one of the most technically advanced mining projects in Australia. We are using new best practice technologies, including robotic laboratory-produced product sampling, auto-refueling, tele-remote dozers, autonomous drilling, remote train control, and, like our friend speaking before, drones. Drones in particular, we have adapted so their functionality is enhanced, allowing us to do multiple things such as monitor mining, environmental and maintenance activity, as well as incident investigation and measuring stockpiles of iron ore that are ready to be loaded. Our Roy Hill project is ramping up this year to become the largest single iron ore mine in the north, to produce 55 million tonnes per annum. Assuming an iron ore price of US $62 per tonne, this will bring tax and royalty revenue over the life of the mine of approximately Australian dollars 9 billion. And if I assume a US $73 per tonne, then approximately Australian dollars 11 billion. The project includes its own integrated low-phosphorus iron ore mine, 344-kilometre heavy-haul railway system, and dedicated port facilities. The journey to build this mine was a mammoth one. I acquired the tenements to Roy Hill in 1993 after they were dropped by another major company who did not think they were of value. Against all professional advice at the time, understandable given the arguably most knowledgeable miner in the Pilbara had decided not worth pursuing, I decided to press forward and take up and explore the Roy Hill tenements. Advice continued to drop them. But fortunately, we found that the other company had not placed their drill holes in the right places, and we found the Roy Hill ore bodies. Our project, after decades of work, risk money, thousands of government approvals, permits and licenses, and US 10 billion investment, is now in operation, exporting its ore to Asia, and recently celebrated a significant milestone, the railing of 34 million tonnes of ore. This is the fastest delivery of ore in the Pilbara and West Australia, beating two of the biggest mining companies in the world, BHP Billiton and Rio Tinto. Our project has also marked a number of firsts, including securing the world's largest debt funding package for a mainly greenfields, land-based mining project from 19 of the largest banks in the world and 5 export credit agencies. Roy Hill uses some of the world's biggest equipment, some of the fastest operating equipment, has won many awards, including environmental ones, and has achieved safety records better than Pilbara and West Australia's averages. Australian mineral resources industry has long been a large contributor to our Australian economy. Entrepreneurs have played a critical part in this, battling many odds, and not only government obstacles, but obstacles put up at times by competitors. Sadly, though, Australian government tape and our Australian legal industry, Indian investors and ourselves have not been able, after investing many hundreds of millions, to open up the Galilee Basin in Australia, to export much needed thermal coal to India, to power your electricity plants with relatively low ash and low sulphur coal. Growing up in the outback in the north of West Australia, like I did, in remote and hot areas without electricity, but supplied by generators operating approximately 2 hours or less per day, I have some understanding of life without electricity in remote and hot areas, long distances from city conveniences, and sympathy too. Fortunately for India, the situation is now changing, and your mining and resources industry has a huge capacity to grow. Across India's vast landmass, around 89 or so minerals are produced, and the mining industry currently makes up about 2 or 3% of GDP. According to an Ernst & Young study, only 7 to 9% of India's mineral resources have been explored. This estimate highlights the enormous potential for future mining exploration across India. I see a very bright future for the resources industry in India, as there are a number of important factors that contribute. Firstly, and as I have already outlined earlier, the reform agenda of your Prime Minister plays a critical role in this, from red tape to red carpet. Prime Minister Modi has welcomed investment and businesses in India. Also working in India's favour is your large population who are wanting to work. To construct new mines and their required infrastructure, more railways, thousands of workers are needed, and with your large population, you are also able to meet these needs and provide jobs to many who need them, as well as further opportunities for the many related industries. Often people don't consider you have a mining industry, and they don't properly consider the amazing continuing effect of the mining industry to employ so many more indirectly. For instance, the bus driver who drives workers to site, the local food vendor who feeds the workers, and the factory worker who makes the uniforms, the people who need to be employed to clean the uniforms and the mining camps, stand to secure greater prosperity if mining exploration and production in your great nation accelerate. Moreover, India is closely located to Asian countries whose demand for mineral resources continues to grow. Closer proximity to the customer means the advantage of lower transportation costs, as you'd know. India's own strong economic growth is a huge advantage as well. As the economy grows, local demand continues to increase, and for those companies needing mineral resources, close domestic proximity is a significant advantage. Indeed, much of the world's cutting-edge technology is invented, developed, and made in India. And India has the huge benefit of many intelligent and hard-working entrepreneurs. I bet there's quite a few in the audience this evening. A good friend who also was an intelligent and hard-working entrepreneur, knowing I was speaking to you this evening, sent me a little joke which I'd like to share, which highlights some Indian ingenuity. Hope you like. It goes like this. One day, a businessman walked into a bank in Mumbai and asked for loan assistance. He met a loan officer and told him that he was going to Europe on business and wanted to borrow rupees 300,000. The bank officer told the businessman that according to bank policies, the bank will need security for a loan. So the businessman handed over the keys to his Mercedes car, which was parked in front of the bank. The bank agreed to accept the car as security. The bank employee drives the Mercedes into the bank's underground garage and parks it. 2 weeks later, the businessman returns and repays rupees 300,000 and the accumulated interest on the same, which was rupees 900. Puzzled, the loan officer asked the businessman, "We are very happy to have had your business and the transaction worked out smoothly, but I am confused. While you were away, we researched you and found that you are a multi-millionaire. Then why would you bother to borrow rupees 300,000? To this, the businessman smiled and replied, "Where else in Mumbai can I park my car safely for 2 weeks for just rupees 900? I stand here before you, not with any view as to needing to say what would be best for you to do. I think I've made that clear. And as I have already heard too from our fine new High Commissioner to Australia about India's plans and your wonderful plans to increase your mining industry. And unlike Australia, you are already heading well and truly on the right path. Prime Minister Modi is ploughing through government red tape, leading the way to help your mining industry. But I would like to add from our experience in Australia, it needs to be not just the federal government who leads the way, the respective state governments need to do so also, should India want to benefit from an expanding mining industry. My father spent around 8 years of his life encouraging the federal Australian government to lift the export embargo on iron ore, which was preventing not only export, but also people wanting to search for iron ore. But he was then still stopped by the state government, who had imposed pegging bans preventing the securing of title to ore discoveries. This delayed development caused considerable financial damage to West Australia, given Asia had become aware of the tonnages lying in its backyard, so to speak, hence affecting the price of ore contracts, given recognition this would now be a buyer's market. For major mining projects to be developed, they require huge amounts of capital and stable and reasonable government regimes, as these huge investments do not show returns for many years and have to cope with the risks of commodity price changes, currency changes, natural events, and more. India can be the engine room of global growth if it continues on its current path. And India can be, with its large resources and potentially more from currently huge unexplored areas, and with its entrepreneurs, one of the most successful resource nations on earth. An exciting future. And in our future, I look forward to welcoming Tom Albanese to Canberra in Australia in November for our National Mining and Related Industries Day, and learning how India has progressed in its mining industry since today. Thank you, and watch out, Australia.